So this month, I want to revisit some of the behavioral science that we've covered in previous Tests of the Month Club with some new insights. So talking first about loss aversion. This is from many Test of the Month had our incarnation before Nonprofit Alliance. I started it when I was with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And so there are some old slides here that we covered many, many moons ago. So this is about 4 years old, I think. But there was a study that tested looking at a fictitious, unusual Asian disease. Back then, it was fictitious. Now it's life. So they talk about the programs in two different ways. One is that either 200 people will be saved, or you can take a chance, and there's a 1/3 probability that you'll be able to save all 600 people, and a 2/3 probability that no one will be saved. In that case, 2/3 of people said, let's save the 200 people for certain. On the flip side, they framed it as 400 people will die, and then a 1/3 probability that no one will die, and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. In that case, 2/3 of people took option B. Let's take that risk. Let's take the opportunity to see, can we prevent 0 people from dying? The trick is that these are the same thing. They're just phrased differently. And so this is Kahneman and Tversky looking at loss aversion back in the 70s as a part of how we don't necessarily, how framing impacts how we look at things. And what they posited is people will take risks to avoid a loss, whereas they will try to lock in gains. So, oh, I can save people, let's lock that in. Oh, I'm going to lose people, let's take the risk to see if we can prevent any losing. And if you can see this behavior in any casino, good money chasing bad. I don't want to have a loss, so let me keep gambling until I don't. Which usually, spoiler alert, usually does not work out well for the gambler. Then also on Test of the Month, we've talked about how there's this weird research about happy appeals versus sad appeals. And there's also a debate about the ethics of what to show in ads. And I'm not going to get into that portion of things. But there are different studies that show that happy ads are successful. No, sad ads are successful. Happy ads are less successful. No, sad ads are less successful. And what we talked about previously is it's not so much the emotion that you evoke, it's the emotion that you tell people that they're going to have as a result of their gift. And so the study that we've covered and I've talked about in a couple of places is the idea of, oh, they got people to take a mood freezing pill. And when people took that mood freezing pill, they were less likely to give because they weren't expecting their emotions to change as a result of it. Now, the trick is that there's no mood freezing pill. It's just a placebo they were telling people, but that alone was enough to get people to not give when they found they couldn't change their emotional state. And so it's looking for that end emotional state, but there is still this big debate in the literature beyond that, which type of appeal is more. So what if on loss aversion and what if on happy versus sad appeals, there is no one right answer? And this is going to sound like some of the things that we talked about last month in terms of lapse giving, that lapsed donors are different from current donors and how we have to take that into account. Spoiler alert, people are different in different places. So the first study was looking at we versus you language versus gain versus loss language. And we versus you is one of those debates in the literature. You hear people saying all the time that appeal letters should be you focused, not talking about we as the organization. Well, this is interesting because it's not we as the organization, but they used inclusive versus exclusive language. And I'll show an example of that in a second. And then there's gain framed versus loss framed. So what are we talking about when we're talking about these things? Gain language was, in terms of cancer, 88% of children survive. 40% of the children who survive continue as if they had never had cancer. Loss language is 12% die, and of those 60% who live, 60% suffer long-term effects. So you can see what's the rainbow, what's the rain here. Then inclusive versus exclusive language, I think you'll see the difference between some of the we, you discourse that you see. The we here is inclusive. Without our donations, these children will suffer more. Without our donations, they'll lose the challenging battle. Without our donations, there won't be enough research. Whereas you is, and you can tell that top one is also framed in the loss framework. The bottom one is framed in the game framework, and it's you. With your donations, these kids smile again. With your donations, boom, 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 you, versus we and the community. So what solution was best? And I should pause here for a moment and put on your thinking caps and say, which set of this would you go for? Would you go for inclusive, exclusive, gain focused, loss focused? Insert match gain music here. Okay, you've thought about that? Nothing won. Okay, well, that sounds like a boring study, but we're not going to look at it overall. What we're going to look at is the splits. It turns out when you're using inclusive language, gain framing is better. So our communities help children live wonderful, productive lives. When you're using exclusive language, when you're saying you, your donation, you're talking about a gain. So your donation makes it possible for children to live wonderful lives. When you're talking us, we language, that loss framing works better. So when we're talking to you, we want positive framing. When we are talking about our community, what we do together, we have that loss aversion. We want to avoid negative things. And the author said, past research has shown that people resist guilt appeals. And so when we're talking about you, we don't want to say the negative side of things. We don't want to say, without your gift, this child will die. That's a guilt appeal. People may militate against that. They want the positive side of things. But we as a community can solve this problem together. And it's okay to talk about a community in this sort of framework. Studies use the same sort of thing, but they versus I language. And this one's a little bit different. It's about the imagery that you use. Are you included in the problem? And this is looking at the issue of wildfires in the West. And so a first-person imagery perspective is, imagine if a wildfire happened to you in your community, if you could face the things that wildfires bring to the table. And we've seen in other Test of the Month Club tests that this type of language can be extremely effective when someone is thinking about and putting themselves in the shoes of someone else. You can see positive results. Flipping it around, a third-person imagery perspective, here's what's happening in California. Here are these wildfires. So many people have lost their homes in the fire. If you and I were writing this, we wouldn't necessarily write innumerable people. We would talk about one person that you're supposed to identify with, but I digress. Gain loss, similar sort of framing to what you saw before. The gain is thousands of people could rebuild their homes and get treatment and save their lives. Loss is without support, they might lose their chance to rebuild home. They won't receive treatment and might lose their lives. So what's best? Gain versus lost, they versus I. Thinking about that, we can use some Jeopardy music here. Don't worry, I'm not singing. Okay, let's look at the results. Again, overall, not a lot of difference. When you break it down, however, there are two clear winners. I lose, they gain. So for me, I am trying to avoid loss. As I'm thinking about it for myself, I don't want to lose my house, my medical treatments, my livelihood. I can think about that. If I'm helping someone else, they benefit from a gain. You can see that over here in donation intent. So what are the implications of this? When we talk about things like loss aversion or good versus bad framing or they versus I types of imagery, when we talk about behavioral science, part of why you saw all of those, saw that different results in the beginning. Happy's good, sad's good, neither's good. Those types of results are, people are doing it with different audiences and different other framings. Other factors come in and skew our results one way or another. Those imagery studies that we talked about earlier, they were I lose framing. They were think about what would happen if you were a refugee and you lost everything. They weren't, it's possible that if that study said, imagine if you were a refugee and all that you could gain if someone supported you, that imagery would have reduced results. That's what this study would tend to indicate. So not everything is one size fits all. There's interactions among effects. And one thing that we didn't talk about here that we talked about last month is there's interactions with people. Different people will respond to different types of appeals differently. But generally speaking, people are loss averse for themselves and gain seeking for other people. They don't like guilt, but they're willing to talk about problems if we can solve them together as a community. So a couple of interesting results there. Shout out any questions you have. Hopefully this is an interesting result. Our other behavioral science topic is matching, and I'll go on, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to jump back. You may remember last month, we talked about the Bavarian Opera Society and the the Bavarian Opera House and their matching gift study and what they found about the different types of matches. And you see here, want to focus in on two numbers here. The difference between a lead donor and a match is largely in this average gift. And the reason that people believe that there's often this effect with matching gift campaigns is that there's a crowding out effect. By what you're doing with a matching gift is I can have the same impact, but cheaper. Oh, you want me to, my usual gift is $100, but right now, because there's a one-to-one match, I can have the same impact with $50. And of course, we always frame it as you could double your impact. But what we're doing is we're reducing the cost of the impact that we're creating. And so that's why matching gift campaigns usually have lower average gifts than lead donor campaigns. And you can see in the literature, this is something that researchers are consistently talking about. What is the crowding out effect of a match gift versus a lead gift versus a traditional appeal and all of those sorts of things? And the basic upshot of it is it depends study to study as to whether it's worth crowding out some of the average gift in order to get the bump that you get from matching giving. But what if we could mitigate that by asking for more money? What if our matching gift campaign also came with a different ask amount? So let's go back to the opera. This is I don't know for certain that this is the Bavarian Opera House that was in the last study. However, it's from a European opera house that gets a lot of its donations, it says, from Germany and Austria. So let's just assume same opera house, same researchers, same sort of study. And they looked at previous non-donors, people who had bought tickets but hadn't made a charitable donation over and above that. Then there were new customers who came in during the previous opera season and who hadn't been asked for any previous donations. Past donors, kind of self-explanatory. So what was the base amount that they used for their ask strings? For past donors, they used highest previous contribution. And then they modeled for previous non-donors based on, demographic factors, where the person was located, what was their ticket purchase amount, and tried to figure out what would I normally ask them for. And so the way they framed the gift in this letter was a fixed. So going back for a second, you see there's an idea of a fixed gift match. We will match any gift you make with 10 euros in this case. This is a variant of this. We will, if you make a large donation, a donation over and above a threshold amount, we're going to top it up with 10 additional euros. And what they did is they took whatever the base would be, and said, let's say we moved from that number. If their highest previous contribution was 50 euros, we could take 50% off of that and ask them for 25 euros and test that amount. We could also ask them for 75 euros, and that'd be 50% above that amount. And they went from down to about negative 90% up to 100% higher. So a good range of different types of asks to see what will cause someone to give the most. So let's look at past donors. For past donors, they had a 31% response rate. I say yes, really here. They appear to send out either 1 or 2 appeals per year. So that response rate does average out to probably be more similar to what we would see here in the United States over the period of appeals. Probably a little less, because that 31%, that means that there's 68% that aren't responding. Let's say 70% to make the math easy. If they're only doing it 2 appeals per year, that means that 70% and 70%, assuming it's random, 49% of people wouldn't be giving during the year. So it is a case for more appeals, but it's also a case for, hey, if you're doing fewer appeals, yes, your response rate will go up. Average gift of 61 euros. And they found that 37% made a gift right at the threshold, whatever that was, where things would be matched, and 31% gave more than that. So 68% of people triggered the match in this campaign. So now to some funky looking graphs. Up in the upper left here, you see the percent increase in new donations. So this is your average gift change. And people who are asked for the same amount that they'd given in the past, since this is our past donors, tended to give a little bit higher than that. It looks like about 8% higher. And that, even if you were asked for 25% less than what you gave before, you're still increasing that donation amount. But there looks like around the 75% threshold, kind of a magic amount where you had the highest increase in average gift. So this is people who gave 50 euros before, who are now being asked for 87 euros, 90 euros to make the math easy. Then they looked at response rate, and it turns out this is not as elastic as I thought it would be. You don't get a huge, even when you're asking for a lot less, 75% less than their previous amount, you're increasing response rate from looks like about 32% up to almost 40%. But as they say, that juice is not worth that squeeze, asking for that amount. So we'll see later on. Similarly, you can ask up to about 50% more than highest previous contribution without a significant drop-off in response rate. That drop-off tends to happen around the 75 to 100% more amount. And so what you're seeing here is that people make their giving decisions in 2 parts. First, will I give? Second, and how much will I give? And so you can't get too much more by asking for less. And you can hurt. People will revisit decision 1 if decision 2 is asking for too much, but not too much. If someone's already made that decision, looks like they're going to about stick with it. And so looking at the fraction of past return, your optimal amount is right around the 75% more amount. So asking people for more than their highest previous contribution tends to work. Do we know if this test was run for all monetary segments or just low dollar donors? These are not high dollar donors. They did restrict I think they said a threshold of 500 euros for HPC was the highest amount that they would ask for. So that said, for those who haven't donated in the past, they did restrict it to a higher amount. They only asked people who they thought were likely to give 10 euros or more, because those really small dollar euro donors wouldn't make for a really good test sample. So these are kind of happy medium direct response donors, I would say, is what we're looking at here. Among the non-donor population, they had a response rate of 2.7%. That was double their previous letter. Match seemed to help. Average gift of 59 euros. Now to the graphs. you can see that as people were asked for more than they were modeled, so about 40%, if you asked for what was modeled, what people would likely respond with, they gave 40% over that mark. You get up to about 75%, and they're more than double the modeled amount. So good results there. New donors tend to be a little bit more elastic. You have to be asking for that right amount with a newer donor. It seems to be, although the modeled amount, not doing great. There's this spike at 75%. And so you look at where you're getting the most revenue out from an acquisition audience, boom, right around that 75% mark, more than they thought they would give, that kind of stretch goal, that compensated for the loss of match. And you can see what we're doing here. We're creating that kind of incidental expense. If you're willing to stretch now, you will activate even more money. And so the matching mechanism is set up to attract that, as is the amount that people are asking for that seems optimal, is designed to cut against any sort of crowding out that you would get from matching gift. So yay, personalized matching gift thresholds. That's a very cool idea that seems to work. And then bumping that up, making it a stretch goal to activate the match, double yay. You do get results. And that 75% seems to be about the comfortable amount. And it does make some intuitive sense. If someone asked you for double what you'd given in the past, that seems reasonable. Potentially unreasonable. Less than that, though, that's sounding pretty good. There's this idea of the least noticeable difference. So if you pick up 2 weights, you'll be able to tell which is the 5-pound weight and which is the 6-pound weight fairly easily. If you were to have to pick up 2 cars that differed by a pound, obviously you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, nor would you be able to walk in the morning. Car is probably a bad example. But as you get up in weight, the noticeable difference goes down. Same sort of thing here, that you don't notice some of the increase that is going on in giving asks, but double seems to go above and beyond. So while we look at questions for matching gifts, for our positive negative framing, for we versus you language, for they versus I imagery, let me give the pitches that we always give here. First is we would love to have people presenting their own studies here. Would love to see your A/B tests, your ABCDE tests, your interesting results that made you go, that's really going to potentially make a change in my program and could be generalizable to other people's programs. The other thing that I want to shout out is we love to get in topics that folks want to learn more about. So last month, we talked about activating lapsed donors. A few months before that, we talked about the unique economic circumstances that we're in and how that will affect things. A little bit of a cheap plug. We're releasing a white paper later on today, talking a little bit about the current economic situations and what people can do. Those types of topics, we love to hear requests for topics. For the match testing, where there's just single ask arrays or 3 or more ask arrays. So they didn't affect they did a single ask array, and what they did was they said, if you give at this amount, 80 euros, if you were a $50 donor, let's say, 50 euro donor. If you give it this amount, we will top it up with another 10 euros. So it wasn't so much the ask array as the threshold for the matching gift amount. Interesting construction. And we don't do, I think researchers to some extent can get away with some of these fancier matching gift options. This would require a little bit of explaining, but not too much. You see people who are doing things here in the United States where it's like, oh, if you make a matching gift today, if you make a monthly gift today, someone will throw an additional $20, those sorts of things. So there are explainable. So any quick suggestions for matches besides incorporating HPC data? I have an online match campaign that ends in 8 days. Any email or donation form test ideas? If you're already running the match campaign. Probably not a good opportunity to mess with the structure of things. So I would say to use reminder emails sparingly. You do want to have those in there, but there was a study that found that if you're the net effect of a reminder email that sort of repeats the original email, response rate goes down by about half. And that portion of that half is taken away from other emails that surround it in terms of revenue, to the point that it's potentially a net negative. So I would be careful about the amount of emailing. That said, you probably do want an email that final day of the match, because that's a good opportunity. You just may not want to load in 4 of them like you would do on Giving Tuesday. I would make sure that you have all of your channels set up. This is a good opportunity to do social, good opportunity to do programmatic digital. You can incorporate it. One thing that people often forget about, that I've been guilty about forgetting about when I was doing online matching gift campaigns, is have you changed your online search engine ads that you can tend to be the online version of Ron Popeil's Set It and Forget It? I forgot it, didn't put the matching gift into that ad copy, and it can be effective. So I would be doing the channel checks there. I would be, like we said here, incorporating highest previous gift data and trying to customize that ask experience toward the person. Even if that's as simple as making sure that the emails that go out, you have a high version and you have a low version. Everyone who gave $100 gift or more in the matching gift campaign or in previous campaigns gets an email that doesn't go, where the ask string doesn't go below 100. That would be a way of making sure that there's less crowding out effect if you're customizing those ask strings a little bit more. Was there any research out that would show the impact of MasterCard's new regulations about recurring giving? Feel like it's spending more time reminding the donors they're making a recurring giving, which may increase cancellations. I am sorry, this is an area that I do not know about and that I will dig into. I would say, generally speaking, that the more that you remind someone of the monthly gift that you have, when you're doing that more, you do lose the people that have said it and forgot it, to steal the phrase from last question. That said, you want to be having people doing monthly giving who want to be doing monthly giving. So losing those folks, yes, it's a little bit of revenue out, but you are then able to focus on people who are concerted in their giving. You can ask for things like upgrades. You can ask for things like one-off gifts. So yes, it may increase cancellation, but it's hopefully an inducement to engage with the donor more and learn more about what will sustain them. I don't know more about the regulations, but it could also be an opportunity to fold in. I know there are some folks that do automatic upgrade. That has always seemed a little shady to me, but if you can put in hey, it's a unique economic environment. Inflation means that we're not able to provide the services that we were able to at the same price. Would you be willing to turn up your monthly gift by even $2 a month? Those types of asks may be pertinent in the current economic environment and may help you revalidate the monthly gift and get additional revenue out. So worth exploring. I need to look at MasterCard's new regulations. So thank you for giving me a line of inquiry. I always learn something on these calls, and I really appreciate that. The match testing, was it mail or digital? That was a mail campaign. They were physically mailing letters in this case. So hope that helps on those. So love to get your tests ideas. Love to get your tests and have you present them. If you want to present a test and you're shy, I can present it for you. Happy to do that, but hopefully it'll be your time to shine, showing a test, showing this community what you can do, which I know is amazing stuff. If you have questions as you're reviewing this, cogitating on it, looking at the slides, thinking more about how am I going to phrase this upcoming appeal, feel free to reach out to me. My name's not Shannon McCracken. It's Nick Ellinger. And I am at N Ellinger, that's NELLINGER, at wearemoore.com. That's WEAREMOORE.com. And Ellinger at wearemoore.com. Or you can always hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, or I'm findable in 20 different ways probably right now. Carrier pigeons, please don't. The stoop is a mess. Have a good day, everyone, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you next week. Thank you.